Hello, everybody. It's Donna Cravata. We are back again for one of our wisdom panels, and this is such a special day for me every month that I get to bring together a group of just remarkable women who are over the age of 50 and that are making a difference every day in people's lives and people's businesses and communities and families, you name it. And I want to introduce you to them, and then we are going to get into a conversation about the intersection of grief and gratitude because they are not separate, they go together. And we're going to talk about that for the next hour. We welcome your questions and your comments. Just put them in the comments in whatever platform you're in. If you're listening or watching on the replay, put them in and tag us, and we will come back and keep this conversation going. But I'm just going to jump right in and start introducing people. Rechelle Conde now is a podcaster and blogger and the creator of Unabashed You. Liane Moccia is a registered herbalist specializing in fertility and preconception planning, and she's a speaker and very soon to be author, which I think she's already an author because that book is written. Janice Porter is a relationship marketing specialist, podcast host and guest, and a LinkedIn trainer. And Deb Coman is a content conversion strategist and copywriter. Stephanie Dalfonzo was supposed to be here today, and I'm really sad that she's not because she was the inspiration for this panel. And she's an integrative hypnotist, anxiety expert, speaker, and author, and is the person that I know that lives her life through the lens of gratitude more than anybody else. She has provided a meditation for us to start with, and I'm going to try and do that, but I wasn't able to bring it into StreamYard. So if you're listening outside here and you don't hear the meditation, let me know so we could stop. But I'm going to start that meditation. It's about 4 minutes, and then we are just going to get into this conversation. Hold on just one moment, and let me launch that. Let's see if this will work.
The most powerful form of magic is gratitude. It's the key to happiness. When we feel gratitude, not just think about it, our brain releases dopamine and serotonin, which are the happy hormones. So let's take a few moments to pause, find, and feel gratitude. Go ahead and get comfortable. Close your eyes if that's comfortable, or let them come to a soft gaze. And take a long, slow, deep breath in. Hold it for a moment. And as you slowly exhale, exhale twice as long. This helps kickstart the relaxation response, allowing your body to relax more and more with each breath. Now, bring to mind something small that you can be grateful for today. Maybe it's the warmth of sunlight on your skin, or the aroma of your morning coffee. Whatever it is, let yourself fully appreciate it now. Next, think of someone who's made a positive difference in your life, no matter how small. Picture their face. Recall their kindness. Let gratitude for their presence in your life fill your heart. Now, consider a challenge you faced recently. Find one aspect of it you can be grateful for. Maybe it taught you something or showed you your real strength. Finally, take a moment to feel grateful for yourself, for your resilience, your kindness, your willingness to grow. You are doing the best you can, and that's worth appreciating. Let's take one more long, slow, deep breath in. Let it fill you with a sense of abundance and appreciation. And now gently open your eyes, carrying this feeling of gratitude throughout the rest of your day. And remember, you can return to this practice anytime, anywhere. Thank you for your time and presence. I'm grateful for you.
Okay. I think everybody heard that. And we kind of have just kind of a set intention to get into this conversation. So let's start with after you turned 50, was there any change in how you felt about grief or gratitude? Maybe you have experienced a loss or you realized that gratitude could be beneficial in some way. But let's start there and just take it around the room, whoever wants to jump in.
Sure, I'll share. I mean, for me, it wasn't like right at 50, I don't believe, but at some point in that decade, um, there were a lot of things that kind of stacked up or crept up, I should say. The milestone birthdays, for sure, and everyone experiences them at different points.
Mhm.
Um, my kids in the process of graduating college and moving on and leaving our hometown, uh, death of parents, death of in laws close behind that, uh, physically feeling different, all the transitions and changes. And I really had kind of underestimated the impact they could have. I wasn't really devastated by any of it, but it was creeping in and I was in my head quite a bit. Like, of course, your parents are going to pass on at some point. Of course, we want to be happy that the kids are moving on. And I think that what I love about this topic is it's not either or,
Yeah.
it's both, right? We can be grateful. In my case, I had a parent no longer suffering, yet I still had grief associated with the loss. So to me, I just am so happy to be a part of this conversation where we get to bring the two together. We recognize that they both have a place in our lives, and they need to kind of, from in my experience, be embodied in order to really fully process them versus just checking the boxes. Yes, I'm sad, or yes, I'm happy or grateful, but really get in there. So I chose grief counseling to get into that in a really get support around it, and it's the best thing I ever did for myself.
I think when I was in my 50s, I lost my mom. And not only did I lose my mom, but she was the last right? My father had passed before, but once I lost my mom, it was a different feeling of I'm it now. For my sister and I, like I'm the older sister, and it felt very different not having parents anymore or a parent anymore. That to me was huge. And at the same time, the other thing that I noticed was I I appreciated my mom a lot more at the end of her life and more after, the woman that she was. I never saw her as much when she was younger in a way that I began to see her after she passed. I can't explain it any other way, but there was just something different. I respected her more. She was a woman who, got married very young and was in the, that generation of the man did everything and you never questioned, you never asked or whatever. And it wasn't until my father passed that she had to begin to fend for herself and learn everything. And so that started the change in my view of her for the better. But it definitely escalated once she'd gone. I never thought about that until you just asked that question, actually. It's kind of, she was amazing.
I would say for me, it wasn't necessarily hitting 50, although I think looking back, every decade has been a richer experience. As you gain the life experience, you're able to look back and appreciate sort of where you've been. I think it was more when I hit 60 and I sort of looked at my life in thirds, like 0 to 30, 30 to 60, 60 plus, however long you get, who knows? It's sort of, I think of it as the third act.
Yeah.
And a lot more intention went behind turning 60 than turning 50. And gratitude clearly was one of those things, and deciding, oh my gosh, what else do I want to do? It's time is of the essence. So in that way, it really lit a fire under any remaining things on the bucket list.
Yeah. I think for me, what I noticed as I turned 50 was realizing this sort of loss of how it's a form of grief, I think, when you hold on to your expectations of how you think things are going to play out in your life and in the life of the people around you who you love. And learning that there is a beauty in the unexpected and letting go, and it's okay to grieve the way you thought things would go, and that new reality, that was big for me. I think a lot of us can relate to being a bit of that type A personality. We plan things, we taskmaster, we manage our careers, we think we have so much control. And there's that time in your 30s and 40s where you're like, I've got it, I am in control and I am driving the ship. And then I think you realize you're not. And there can still be beauty in that. And I think that was the biggest thing for me coming into my 50s was embracing that loss of total control.
Yeah. I lost two people in my 50s, my brother and a very close friend. But in my 40s, I lost two other people. One was my mom, and the other was my son's father. And my mother and my brother and my son's father, they were my boogeymen. And it was hard because I didn't know how to separate the grief and the gratitude from that. And when I was in my 50s, the two people that I lost in my 50s, my brother, who was the difficult one, and my friend Patty, who was my biggest champion. She died 2 weeks after my brother died. And both were unexpected. They both had strokes and they both died too young. And what I learned, and I really do believe Patty brought me this lesson, is I learned forgiveness. And I learned how to separate the grief and the gratitude. And so much of the grief was loss of what I didn't have in a family. And I was really able to come to terms with so much of that and heal a lot of the trauma that came from being brought up in a very dysfunctional family. And it changed everything for me. It really did. It made me a better parent, which is everything.
Yes.
And we also have like a really powerful comment from the audience too. And this is Randy Kay. I know it's her, and I'm sure she's going to be okay with me sharing her name because she's shared about this very publicly. But she's experiencing right now an ambiguous loss because her son is schizophrenic,
Mm.
and he's she's going through some extreme grief, and also being very vocal about this because she wants to share her story, so it is available for other people to see as well. But he's got severe mental illness, and he's been, smoking marijuana, and that has a really bad impact on his mental health. And it's just been a really heartbreaking situation. So, if you want to follow along, she's got a podcast that talks about being a parent of a schizophrenic child. Her name is Randy Kay, Randye Kaye. And, if you know anybody that can gain support from her sharing her story, please pass them along to her. Or if it can help anybody in this audience, or if anybody just wants to give Randy a hug because she needs it. It's hard. So Randy, I hope that was all okay. And now we have something else. Separating gratitude from grief can be difficult, but you have to learn to have the gratitude through the grief. And I think that this is a really good thread for us to pick up on as a group. So if anybody has anything that you'd like to share around this,
We're
let's go.
actually doing a series right now based on a conversation I had with Donna a couple months ago, in which we paired grief and gratitude. And I'm not sure yes, I've thought about it, but not quite as succinctly as that. And we ended up we're still in the series right now, Grief and Gratitude, courtesy of Donna's idea, and getting to talk to different guests about this notion, this truth, this reality of grief and gratitude, and how it's both and, like you said, Deb, they come together, and hopefully you are looking for the gratitude. You're not grateful for the situation, you're grateful in the situation. And that distinction, I think, is really an important one.
That's helpful to me, I have to say, because I lost my best friend 2 years ago, November 7th. And it happened, she died in her sleep. And, we never got to say goodbye. She wasn't sick. It was just, she was the caregiver for her husband who was sick. And I think it got the better of her in the end. And she had a heart attack in her sleep. And she and I had known each other since high school. And she's the only person I know who could make me laugh and cry at the same time. And I used to say, and she used to say, you can't leave me because we know too much, like you just can't leave me. And then when she left with no goodbye, it was very difficult. And yet and it's making me teary now when I think of it, because I do think of her daily, and I think, what would she tell me to do, or and then I'd smile, because she had such a wonderful attitude about life. And she would always make it funny, or have see the sunshine in everything. And so she was that piece herself that would bring the gratitude and the joy out of the grief. And so she, in a way, is there leaning on my shoulder, teaching me that as I go, because it's hard. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
I love the meditation that Stephanie shared, because there's such a vastness around grief and gratitude. And for gratitude, a lot of times it can be these very small things that we can just pause and take in and say, this is great. Like, it might not be something I'm going to shout from the rooftops, but I can, because it just feels really good to me, and I want to pause long enough to notice. And the same with grief. It's easy to think, not easy, but we tend to think of death and really big losses. And much like you shared, Liane, one of the pieces for me that was pointed out through a friend was that idea of the things that may never be now, what you shared. And there were a lot of them. They weren't necessarily big things, but I had spent a lot of my life thinking, oh, someday I'll do this or have that or go there, and starting to realize like maybe I will, but it seems likely that I might not. And that letting that have some space, and I found some gratitude in that because it felt like an undone wish or hope. And then when I looked at some of them, I was like, I don't really even want that anymore. But until I paused and took a moment or two, it felt like a loss or some sadness around that. So I just think that there's a broad range of how we experience both of these, and that's what's so wonderful about bringing the attention to it, Donna, here today, and Rechelle in your series, because we tend to sometimes just look at the big examples, and there's so much more into the nuances, I think.
That's a really good point. I just interviewed a woman on my podcast named Tracy Gates, and Tracy wrote a book called what's it called? It's called The Power of a Few Kind Words, and it was an amazing book, very easy to read. But it was based on a story or based on a truth that her father, who had passed a long time ago, her father used to, she and her sister would ask, what do you want for Christmas, Dad? What do you want for your birthday, Dad? Whatever. And he'd always say just a few kind words. And she had an epiphany one day that she wanted to experience this by writing a note or a card or a letter a day for a year. She didn't know who the people were going to be until the days, until it came to her each day. But these are the stories of the letters and notes of gratitude that she sent to people. And what she did was she didn't say thank you in each of the notes. She found another way to say showing appreciation and all of these things. And each story is just amazing. And at the end of them, she gives you an action that you can go and do as well. And it resonated so well with me because, part of what I do is teach people or try. I don't know. This is something to ask you guys is, the act of sending out to give is a very special thing, to expect nothing in return. And that's what each of these notes every day were. For example, there was one letter that she went to jury duty one week, and the woman that met her at the desk and checked her in, she said she studied this woman while she was sitting in the waiting area, and she just saw how lovely she was with everybody that came up, which, for a government employee isn't always the case when they've been doing the job for 20 odd years, right? Next, that kind of thing. And she said she decided right then and there that she was going to write a note that day to that lady. And there was a story about how she found her later on, and how this, like months or a couple of years later, the woman had retired. And she looked her up, found her, and this woman was crying, saying, I'll never forget that note that you sent me, that type of thing. But it was really, really fascinating and interesting and a beautiful, she's a lovely woman. And there's just that whole thing there about sending out to give and expect nothing in return. And today, in this busy world that we're in, and the world of digital everything, it's hard. A lot of people don't do those things, and we need to do it. We need to stop and give that grace and that gratitude to people that aren't expected. And it's the little things, like you said, Deb, it's the little piece that isn't being expected. It's the, anyway.
Yeah.
So I recommend.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just saying I recommend this book.
Oh, yeah, it sounds lovely.
Podcast.
I have a little one I learned at my local Wegmans that when the cashier does packages my things well, I will go to the service desk
Yes.
and say, hey, just so you know, this person on whatever. And they said, okay. And they write it down because they give them like, I don't know, a $5 lunch certificate. And once I learned that, I do it almost every time I go. Like, unless they're horrible at it, I think this is like a small thing. They don't need to know it's me. It's not a big deal, but we can find pockets like that, like you're saying, Janice.
Beautiful.
Kind words, a note, whatever that is. We talked about it before we started today, like on social media. Are you giving some meaningful feedback to someone? That can go a long way to expressing gratitude without, like you said, saying the words thank you. So love that.
I like that too. That's because we're so quick to go and complain for, when it doesn't happen, but to do it for the person that did do the good job, that's a bonus, and it's wonderful.
Stephanie introduced me to a little gift that you can give people. There are these stickers called, they say, "You are beautiful."
I got one of those.
Yeah, I send them out when I invite people to be part of the Real 50 Over 50. It's one of the things I include in their little welcome envelope. But I carry these in my pocketbook with me, and I hand them to people.
Nice.
So, like, if I just see somebody looking sad, I'll pull one out of my bag and I'll hand it to them. I always give them to cashiers. I always give them to gas station attendants.
Are there such things anymore as gas station attendants?
Well, if you go to New Jersey, but, wherever I am, like if, interactions like flying, like giving this to that person who's totally stressed behind the desk at an airport, it changes their entire day. And like you can get a whole package of these for like $15, and it's youarebeautiful.com. But it really makes a difference.
Yeah. I had a mentor once challenge us all to, on a daily basis, intentionally 3 times a day, do something that supports someone in some way. It sounds very vague, but she gave some examples. Like it could be, Donna, the examples you just gave, carrying these stickers around. It could be on social media, giving a kind response, reaching out to someone you just happen to think they popped in your mind, you haven't thought about them in a while, you send them a quick note to say, digitally, a handwritten, whatever. I was thinking about you, hope you're having, whatever. And I'm a bit of a, I can be very skeptical, science-minded person. I'm like, it's a little hokey, but I'm in this, I trust this person, I'm going to do it. And we would write them down. And I have to tell you, after doing it for a couple of months, it really does retrain and rewire your brain to think about showing up in a way that is giving and serving of other people. And that comes back to you in so many ways. It helps you build authentic relationships. It helps you feel and brighten your own day while brightening others. It was a really beautiful suggestion that I've really tried to keep in my life.
I think that's one of the, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I think that's one of the points of gratitude is, yes, it feels good. It also takes practice. So however you choose to do that, be it writing a small note like the gal that wrote the book, or Donna carrying around the "You Are Beautiful," you have to actually do it. And there are so many ways to get started, but it does take practice. And I think, like anything we want to get better at or grow in, we have to practice it.
Yeah. And when you do practice that, it changes you.
Yes.
That's what I was just going to say, that one of the things that I teach people when we're talking about sending out cards to people and not expecting anything in return, I'll say something like, spend a week and send a card to someone every day, whoever comes into your mind, because that's something that you want to ask yourself. Who needs to hear from me today? Or who needs, to have something positive happen in their life? And what happens after you've done it for a week or 10 days, it changes you. It starts to, you feel it's your, you're the person that gets changed the most. You don't know what it does to the other person unless they, do respond to you. And it's funny because I don't expect people to respond to my cards, but when people do, then I know. And it's so much, it's so nice when they say, oh, you don't understand. Quite often, and Tracy says it in her book too, quite often people will respond and they'll say something to the effect of, you have no idea what that card did coming to me today.
Yeah.
It always arrives at the right time. and there are no accidents. So it's beautiful. And that's so true. Yeah.
Liane, when you shared that piece about writing down the acts that you did, can you talk any about that part, the writing down? Because I think for a lot of us, we hear and see these suggestions about not just thinking the things or doing the things, but the act of writing them. So was there anything that came forward for you around that part of the practice?
Yeah, I feel like it helped me solidify it as a practice because it was something that, when you think about something and you write it down, there's this piece of us. It's almost like if you're someone who likes lists and you like to check them off, it motivates you to say, okay, I did it, I wrote it down. I think there's also a psychology around giving yourself credit for what you're doing as opposed to just, you did it, you think about it. When you write it down, you really are owning that act, and it's that credit. So for me, it really helped establish the practice. It helped me look back. So I'm a paper person, so I do keep a daily to do, a day planner, and there's a section in it on the right where I write my things, and I love flipping back and remembering on them. I really think it helped establish the practice.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's very powerful, and it does happen at the right time. When I was working in New York City, and I was always running around, I used to do this little game with myself. I would walk down one block, and I would have like a pissed off, frowny face on, just to see the reaction of people coming my way. And it was almost like they were repelled against me, like like water, like when water repels, and it just, like people would just bounce off of me. But then the next block, I would smile and I would stand up a little straighter and I'd like hold my head up a little higher. And people would come and ask me for directions. They'd smile back. They'd hold the door open. And just that little experiment was something that I still carry with me today, that if you just stand up a little taller, if you just take a deeper breath, if you just look somebody in the eye, and you don't know what that other person is going through. You don't know what their day is like.
That's right.
Uh, it's these little things that really do make a difference, and I think when you combine that with grief, and then it becomes commingled, so the grief isn't so, just so, like, ripping out of your insides, it creates almost like this buffer for figuring out, well, what is the story here? What is the message here? What is the lesson here? And you could almost meet it where it is because you have this other entity on the other side that's just growing.
Well said.
It is. I also think what you just said, Donna, it made me think about how I think sometimes we need to give ourselves permission to feel gratitude in
Mhm.
grief. And that takes practice too, because sometimes it can bring up feelings of guilt and, questioning and shame. Like I'm going through something very hard. I'm grieving something very hard. I shouldn't be feeling gratitude, joy,
Mhm.
happiness. But we have to, it takes some work to remind ourselves that it isn't, it can be an and thing. You can feel grief and gratitude together, but it takes practice and it takes permission and acknowledging that.
Yeah, it's totally. How does that play out in your work, Leanne?
Mm,
Because, I mean, there's a lot of disappointment
a
and
lot.
happening with
Yes,
people that you're working with.
so much. When people are dealing with infertility, loss, wanting to build a family and it's not happening the way they thought it would, it can be hard to find gratitude in those moments. And it's a lot about giving yourself permission to say that it is what you're going through is hard and it's sad, and we're going to grieve it, and we're going to hold gratitude for the other things in our lives that we can feel thankful for. It's a lot of giving that permission. And one of the things I like to remind my clients is your body doesn't know the difference between faking it until you make it and
Mm,
truly feeling it. So if I can remind a client that you can be grateful for, I love the meditation, that cup of coffee, just the aroma of your coffee in the morning, the aroma of your tea, the snuggle of your furry pet, whatever it is that gives you that uplifted, joyful moment. If you can tune into that and hold on to it, the neurochemicals that are released are as if you were, are real. It deregulates your stress system. your stress hormones come down. You have a physiological response to experiencing and feeling that gratitude. And it may be just for the small moment, but if you can replicate those moments over time, it can make a big difference.
Yeah, they become part of your memory.
Mm-hmm.
And then they become associated with the grief. So it's not
Right.
just grief that you're feeling, you're
Right.
actually feeling this other complex.
Right. And we're never trying to, right. And we're not trying to talk ourselves out of the grief, because the grief is real and it's there and we need to be in it and move through it and with it. But we can be holding both.
Yeah. And it's another way to build resilience, because it's a scale, just like resilience is. You counter trauma with resilience. So when you experience a trauma, if you build that resilience muscle, you're actually, it doesn't lessen the trauma, but what it does is it strengthens the parts of you that could face that trauma. And the same thing happens when you're working with building gratitude in relationship with your grief. It's just, it's amazing when you can put these pieces together, and so often this doesn't happen till you're 50 or older. Is there any other way that you see this coming out in different areas of life or different experiences, or like something that surprised you from this process?
Yeah, I'll just briefly tell part of my story, which is our 5 months pregnant, found out the child I was carrying had a lethal heart defect and was not going to live past birth. And of course, you hear you're grieving a situation that isn't even finished yet. I'm still growing this baby, and he's not going to live. The fast forward towards, so we grieve the loss before he ever is even born. Well, he's born and he ends up being a candidate for a surgery, and that's what I could go into all kinds of necessary. He lived for 92 days. Well, that was completely unexpected, this living for 92 days. He was in the hospital for a time, and then he got to come home for a time. And the story just completely changed. So there was so much to be grateful for. However, things happened, and then he wasn't well anymore, and he ended up dying. I have just become such a strong proponent for looking for gifts after loss. And through time and awareness and asking lots of questions, I wrote letters, people wrote us, I put them all together. I mean, there was a lot of processing of the grief, but what I found, and for lack of a better term, on the other side, because this is, post passing, is there were so many gifts. There were so many things that I could trace directly back to our time with him. And I'll give you probably one of the best examples. A family across the street we were new to the neighborhood. We didn't even really know anybody. And they gave us a sympathy card. And in the sympathy card, they had these tickets to a children's production that their kids were in. So we took our kids to that. And my son said, I want to do that. I want to do that. Well, he ended up getting involved with that organization, and he's a performer today. I mean, that one little thing that they were just doing, like a small kindness, thinking of us, this trajectory and this impact that it had was just like, oh my gosh, do you realize that you became a performer and you met all these lifelong friends because, and then tracing it back to this sweet, simple little sympathy card with tickets in it. And I have so many examples like that. My point is that you have to actually look for those gifts. Again, like everything we're saying, it's practice. It takes an awareness, it takes time, and it takes questions. And then I just feel that it was very important for me that I would really just trace all these things. And for me, as a woman of faith, I was tracing the hand of God in the way that he was really gifting us, even though there was somebody who wasn't here anymore. And of course, it was a very hard time, a very difficult time, all of those things. And yet there was so much to be grateful for. So That's
Yeah.
my little story in a nutshell, and why I
It's
feel
no little story.
that's why I feel so strongly about looking for gifts after loss. I just it's just one of my zones. That's one of my areas of passion for sure.
Yeah, and we have a LinkedIn for some reason is not showing the people that are posting, but we have somebody sharing that they lost their daughter, and this one particular song really helped them through deep grieving. So you don't know where that's going to come from.
Mhm.
You don't know the message that you're going to get. I mean, my brother passed away like 10 years ago. It's going to be 10 years next month, and actually next week. And I can't listen to 2 songs,
Mm,
and I break down.
Yes.
yeah.
I can't listen to me and Bobby McGee, and I can't listen to, um, oh, now I can't remember the song, but, it's a reggae song, and that he wanted that played at his funeral, and I can't listen to it. I just break I'm gonna start to cry now just even thinking of it,
Mm.
and we weren't even talking.
Oh,
Well,
wow.
that's its own kind of grief. You mourn what you didn't get to have. I mean, that's
That I mourned that many, many years ago.
yeah, that's another layer.
Yeah, that's a whole other layer. I mean, I mourned my mother and my brother years before they died because, I recognized it was incredibly unhealthy to have them in my life.
Mm,
I needed to make a hard choice. Mm.
wow.
So there's grief with that too. And when they passed, it was hard. It was really hard because, there was part of me that was incredibly sad and sorry, and then there was a part of me that was deeply relieved.
Did you feel that you didn't have closure?
No, I had closure with both of them.
Okay.
I
Okay.
I said my
Yeah.
piece, but,
Okay.
it was just sad because it didn't need to be
Sure.
there.
Yeah.
None of
Mm.
it needed to be
Yeah.
there.
That's really sad. I know.
None of it needed to be that way. And my brother, he was never diagnosed, but I believe him that he was bipolar.
Mm.
And, when my mother died and my father died, who we had no connection with, but when we learned that he died, my brother basically gave up because he felt like there was no chance to reconcile. And that's why when, those changes happened in my life when they passed away, I recognized that I needed to learn to forgive in a different way, to forgive for my own benefit, because I didn't wanna carry the bitterness that they carried and the anger. And that was a really big thing to learn how to do. And I had this workbook that somebody had given me to work through forgiveness and to learn that you can forgive somebody without them actually being there. And I had my hot water heater replaced a couple of weeks ago, and the young guy that came to, replace the hot water heater had a lot of the same anger that I used to hold, and I gave him that workbook.
Oh.
With my notes in it and everything, I gave him that workbook.
What a
Oh.
gift.
That's
I think it's
beautiful.
brought up a really good point, Donna, about sometimes people aren't capable. And I think that's something that I've really come to understand better
Yeah,
getting older is that, like you're growing up and your parents likely did not give you everything you want or needed. I
no,
mean, there's just no way
no,
to be able at some point to realize they were not capable. They
Right.
just weren't. So how do you keep somebody on the hook for something that they could not do, and being able to let them off that hook and give them that grace and that forgiveness allows you to move on and to be free from it and to realize, okay, I didn't get X, Y, or Z. I can get that for myself now.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Such an important thing to learn, I
It
think.
was life-changing. It was absolutely life-changing, and, I had to forgive myself too, because I was in the middle of that for most of my life. I didn't know how to get out, but I learned, and I learned through having incredible people in my life that
Mhm.
showed me, that guided the way, that there's another way to live, and that's what I really that's why this entire thing about the real 50 over 50 is so important to me, because I recognize that we all have stories and expertise and skills and knowledge that not enough people know about. And just hearing what, I mean, somebody can hear something today in this conversation 6 months from now who none of us know, and we can change their life. And I that's the kind of stuff that just wakes me up in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I think something that comes to me from what you said is that it's important that we continue to work on ourselves one way or another, whether through personal development, through therapy, through whatever works for us, or the friend that gave you that book. It doesn't matter what it is, but if we continue to learn and grow and work on ourselves, things change, and it helps. You brought something up for me with my dad, that he passed when he was 63, and there was a lot of anger from my mother when my father died, and my sister and I didn't get to grieve properly because we had to deal with my mom, and it took a long time to process all of that, and then there was some forgiveness needed for me from to myself, and it took working on it and learning where my feelings were coming from to let go of them. And I think that's really important, because you can't move on if you stay in that place of whatever it is that's stopping you.
And I do believe that forgiveness plays a role
Yes.
in that relationship between grief and gratitude.
Yes.
It's almost like that neutral space where they can meet.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I love that, the older we get, the more wisdom we have.
Oh, God.
Yes.
Well, what about that? What about if we talk about the wisdom of either grief or gratitude, or both? Because I'm sure we've all learned a thing or two on a cellular level from experiencing these, or from guiding somebody through them.
Gosh, for me, I would say the layers, which we've all kind of touched on, that it's one thing to say, oh, I've been there, I've processed, I'm good. And it's another to recognize that frequently, if not always, there's more there. And it doesn't mean we're living in that grief all the time. Um, and much like everyone has shared, that these emotions and the energetics that come with each of them can coexist, and they do. And if when we allow ourselves that grace to be sad and then to flip and be happy in a moment, and then maybe feel some shame or guilt because, well, why am I doing this? It just allows space for all of that. And I feel like when we speak about gratitude, one of the things I learned is, and it was from a retreat leader many years ago, that when someone close to her died, her friend sat at the end of her bed and said, "Tell me about," and the person's name. Like, we tend to be, "I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry for that." Find the space to say, "I'd love to hear more." And I've had this happen with friends. Go to their house with a cup of coffee and just say, "We can talk, we cannot talk, but I'd love to hear more about your friend, your brother, your parent. What's their name? I have a good friend who I recently said, 'What was your dad's name?' And she said, 'Thank you so much for asking.'" That's where we find the place where we can be of service in very small ways, and then just experience how that is, and be that, gives grief its space, and recognize that we all do it differently. Just like we all do gratitude differently, and that's the beauty of it. There is no right or wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
I love what you said about
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Giving grief its space, I think, is really, really important. I see this a lot with the people I'm working with that are grieving infertility or loss. And it is such a private thing for many people that they don't often, it's not the same as the loss of a person where you might go to the funeral, unless it's a loss of a child. But they often are grieving silently with this struggle to build their family. And I run a lot of support groups, and you can see, for people who are able to verbalize how mad they are, how sad they are, and then say all the things that our polite society doesn't really want to hear in a lot of other groups, or think we think that people, like they'll say, you know, I'm really pissed off that my best friend just got pregnant and I didn't. And she's my best friend. And now I have to go to her baby shower. And I love her and I hate her, you know, like, so you can say these things, and you need that space to be able to let grief have a place.
Mm.
Yeah.
Now, does anybody have experience or an example of something that happened that caused you grief, that surprised you, like you would never expect to grieve over something like this?
You know, I can share one that comes to mind, and it may be very specific, but this goes along to, I think, what I said at the beginning about grieving the loss of how I thought things would happen. So when I have twin daughters who are now teenagers, and when they were in their tween years and one of them got their first period, I did not expect to handle it the way I did, right? It is not about me, right? It's about her. But somehow I felt like I got hit by a ton of bricks. I was mad. I was like, this is still a little girl and she is not ready for this. And she shouldn't be. And here I am. I'm in the fertility world. I talk about menstrual health all the time. This is not a taboo topic for me. This is what I spend my whole life talking. I ask people about their periods all the time. And somehow when one of my daughters was there, I was like, no, you're still a little girl. And I had to check myself, and I checked in with some of my girlfriends. I'm like, did any of you else feel this way? Like, I am mad. Why did this happen? And, you know, of course, again, talking through it. And I know it's a very minor thing. This is not a heavy topic, but for me, it was that loss of how I thought things were supposed to happen and why they happened the way they did. And going to people and talking through it really did help me come to the other side of it and be able to find the humor and the gratitude and move through it.
Mhm. Well, I think from this discussion, we can all agree that there are no little things.
Right. I was going to say, there must have, to me, when I heard that story, I'm thinking, and please don't take this the wrong way, but I was thinking, was it about you feeling that made you feel older faster, or what, yes, you expressed that it was, you didn't want her to grow up so fast, and why was this happening to her now? But was there something about that personally?
Yes, it was that loss of like, we're at a different stage in our lives. All of us are. She is, I am, and I didn't want to be here yet.
Yeah. That's great. Those are the things, right?
I mean, I just recently had one. My son is in college. He's going to graduate next month. And, when he went to college, we were ready for this. I was a single parent the whole time. So like we had our fill of togetherness, and we were really honest and open about talking about this all along. But he came home a couple of weeks ago for dinner, and he just said, I'm not coming back. And that was just like, whoa. And I wasn't even expecting him to. Like, I really was, I was thinking he's gonna just go and do whatever's next. But when he said it and when he came in, he was like a man. He wasn't a boy anymore. And because I hadn't seen him in like 2 months. And then when he said that, I was like, wow, this is real. The house started to echo.
Yeah, I've absolutely had that. The thing of, wait a minute, like we know, like you say, I knew my kids were probably not going to settle in this area. And yet when it happened, you're like, wait a minute, like it feels very final, that feeling. And I've also experienced it even with my own body and movement, when I think, wait, maybe I'm never going to do that physical thing again, or it kind of doesn't make sense for me to do that thing that I wasn't very good at to begin with. And now what's going to happen? That was something that was very unexpected, that did bring around some grief and some loss around that realization of, oh, wait a minute. Or any of us who have thought of our parents at this age, seem way older than I do. But again, it's that thing of how we feel inside and what society tells us about certain ages. And there's just so much to sort through that I think giving ourselves the space internally and then with the people that we trust to share this, like you're allowing this space for us to do this. When we did the meditation, my gratitude that came up was that I and us here get to speak about things. Like, not everybody gets a platform of any type to share their story, and we don't have to be a professional speaker to do that. And I think this is what you're bringing, Donna, to everyone is like all of our stories are important. All of our messages, all of the what seems ordinary is really not ordinary.
No.
And that's the beauty of it is ask people, give them the space to share, and we can all learn from each other. So I'm just super grateful for being able to do this, and like you said, to expand our circles, to meet new people, to bring people who are commenting on LinkedIn into the conversation. Their stories matter just as much as the ones we prepare to talk about, So thank you all for that space.
Thank you too.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that one of the hugest points that we've all made and we've all done and are all doing is that this is all a process. This is all a process that has many, many steps, many, many layers. There's no should in any of it. But I think lots of people don't process. They push it down, they try to put it on the back burner, they escape, and because they don't want to feel it, it's extremely painful. Nobody would sign up for it, and yet we're all going to feel it and go through some version of it at some point, and likely way more than one time, many, many, many times. Loss of a dream, loss of a person. I mean, so many different things. You have to commit to the process, because it's going to keep coming back and biting you in the rear. It just will.
Yeah. And the gratitude piece isn't about putting on a happy face. It's about really deeply finding, that there's always a silver lining somewhere. And when you're looking for it, you see it. When you're not looking for it, you don't.
Well, and just a quick little PS on my story. We ended up adopting a daughter after our son. And I just feel so strongly that she was meant to be a part of our family. She had some special needs, and just like, wow, we got to raise her, and she was really meant for us. So in a way, I feel like our son sort of made room for her, and that's a whole nother story that is incredible. And I mean, just wow, we got to raise this girl who really needed us. She needed us. So, that's
beautiful.
Yes.
Absolutely beautiful. And Karen is weighing in that we push it down. She's done that for years, and she's finally learned how to grieve, and it's made a massive difference. Thanks for sharing, Karen. So we're like at the top of the hour. I want to thank you all. I am going to go around the room, and I'm going to ask you each to provide a wisdom bomb. And when you do, I'm going to show your website. So everybody grab their websites, check out, connect with them, check out what they're doing. We've got authors and podcasters and social media people, and everyone's active on here. So, get involved with us online. Hold on just one moment. Let me just get my websites up here. Okay. Liane, let's start with you.
I'll start. I would say give yourself permission to put yourself first when you're going through grief. You do not have to follow the script of what society thinks is appropriate for grieving. We're coming into the holidays. If that means saying no to some things and prioritizing yourself and giving yourself permission, that's what you need to do to go through this time right now. But it's really about honoring what you need and putting yourself first.
Janice?
I would say, if you can, make it a habit or start a habit of reaching out to show appreciation to somebody each day. Because as you do that, you start to feel like a different person. And you do not know what that's going to do to the person that you reach out and appreciate. It's so important. And especially at this time of year, don't wait to send Christmas cards or
birthday cards to people. Send unexpected cards, unexpected notes. Pick up the phone, send a voice message. Whatever it is, people really appreciate it. And you don't know what you're doing for that other person, but you do know what it will do for you.
Excellent. Deb?
We can't hear you.
You're muted.
So sorry.
That's
Give
okay.
grief the space and attention that it deserves so that we can create more space for the gratitude and know that they can and coexist and make space for all of it. There's enough room.
That's beautiful. And Rechelle?
I would say look for the gifts after loss. They are there. Look for them.
Okay, that is, let me see, we have, we have some more comments here. Jennifer is saying it's a wonderful conversation. Thank you. And I think that that is just the perfect note to end. And I want to thank you all for sharing your stories, for being here, for being vulnerable and open. And I want to thank everyone who contributed comments. And if you're listening on the replay, please tag us. We'll come back and let's just really keep this going because it is just such an important conversation. And I don't think we can hear it enough. And this isn't exclusive to anyone. We all share grief in one form or another. We all experience it. So all I can say is let's do it together. And let's not forget the gratitude piece either. Let's not focus only on the grief. And
Thank you, Donna.
that's it. We will be back. We've got interviews booked all the way into June, taking next week off for the holiday here in the US. But other than that, we're going. And every month we have wisdom panels. Next month in December is going to be about belonging. And we've got a great panel for that too. And please connect with everybody here. You can catch them on their individual websites or on the real50over50.com, where they are all featured. And there's the website for that too. Thank you again. And if you're in the US and you're celebrating Thanksgiving, have a great holiday.